Welcome to the Independence by Design podcast, where we discuss what it means to be a business owner and ways to get unstuck from the day-to-day so we can design a business that gives us a life of independence. Welcome back. Today, I am so excited for you to listen to this episode. I've got Heather Braimbridge Cox on the show, and she is the CEO of Winnings, and also Bill Mills, who is the founder of the leadership process. And he was on the show a couple weeks ago sharing his process. And I was so impressed. And he was talking about this case study. And I'm like, hey, why don't you invite Heather on? Well, Heather joins me along with Bill today, sharing about what she did to take a distressed ESOP that was cash strapped and was in a pickle with a lot of their, I don't remember what the stat was, if it was like 8 or 9 out of 10 top clients were very unhappy. She took this entire distressed company, completely turned it around. And my favorite part of the conversation, honestly, was towards the end, because what I realized throughout the entire conversation was Heather intentionally has done all the stuff that I'm talking about, implemented a framework where she understood the game of ownership because she came from private equity. She then had a clear understanding of the financial roadmap and get all the data together so she could actually start making decisions. She had a value growth strategy, but then she got to this bottleneck, which is the leadership team and pay and the culture, which is where Bill and the leadership process came into place. And like literally it created escape velocity for her, where like she now is spending her time doing fun things in strategy, M&A. Here's a couple stats that they're going to share. Her employee turnover went from 20% down to 3.9. Her productivity for her employees went from 77 to 99.8. I mean, everyone's happy, from her customers to her employees, and they're making a lot of money. Like, what an amazing thing. And she's spending her time in the things that she loves. So you're in for a treat. I think Heather is just amazing. I was unbelievably impressed, and I really enjoyed having Bill there help synthesize what I'm doing, what Heather's doing, and how all this stuff is possible if we get the right foundation in place. So without further ado, here's my interview with Heather and Bill. So yeah, Heather, I'm excited. So we'll talk a little bit about your background, and then I'll give you a little bit of mine too, so that way we can jump into this. I was excited when Bill had shared his framework and leadership framework, and you and I were just talking about how you came from the private equity space and you got sick of having to lay people off. So maybe you want to just repeat what you said before I'd had the technical screw up.
If I can remember it.
Yeah.
But yes, I was saying that in that space, that's their model, right? I felt like I would start over every 3 to 4 years if I did a really good job. That's really how it works.
Were you an investment banker or financial analyst, or how did you end up in the PE space?
No, my background is in international finance, right?
Okay.
So I refer to myself as the operating CFO, CEO, CAO, whatever it is they needed me to be. But I was that operator who would help to turn things around after an acquisition or in the private space. And
was it post-acquisition typically?
Typically improve the multiples, prepare it, get it ready,
So you're the one that has to you're the one that has to turn reality into what everybody promised when they got the deal done and all the people made their commissions. Like, here you go, Heather.
And you can't do it without the folks on board, right? So your team has to work with you, and they have to be motivated, and they have to be really into it. And so there's nothing like that letdown when 3-4 years later, you have to tell them, oh, we sold the business and now you're out of a job.
After all that hard work.
Business is moving out of state, right? And the last time I did it, it impacted too many people that I had gotten close to.
Yep.
And so I was sharing with you that it really hits at the heart when you have to tell, someone that you no longer have a job and they've been there for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And starting over is not so easy once you're past 50 for a lot of people. And so it just wore on me having to do that. And I got the opportunity to come work for an employee-owned company in New Ulm, Minnesota. Now, I lived in Mobile, Alabama.
So New Ulm or Mobile, Alabama to New Ulm, huh?
But I was intrigued by this model of employee ownership. Right?
Where did you come across ESOPs and employee ownership? Like what was your How did you thread that needle? Because I had this guy, Daniel Goldstein, on the show. He was in finance, and actually I titled that podcast when I first started coming across it, "The Purest Form of Capitalism." And I've actually had the old CEO of Conscious Capitalism on the show too. So I'm tracking where you're going here. I'm just curious on like, where did that realization and exposure come from, and what was your first impression?
Well, actually, it was a recruiter who called me
Okay.
and told me about this opportunity. I had heard of employee ownership before, but I had never worked with a company that really deployed the model. And Wind-Ins in New Ulm had been employee owned since 1998.
Well,
Right
okay.
now, I came here late 2015,
Okay.
but they had a really good setup where the employees were participating and they got a stake in the outcome. Immediately, it resonated with me because here, people really had an interest in the business.
Mm-hmm.
They knew how they would impact the bottom line and how that impacted their bottom line in the end, right? And that to me was magic, right? Every CEO wants to have a business where the employees are totally engaged and they get it. They can make decisions and they will always make the right decision for customers and for the business because they understand how it impacts them personally and the team.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that was just this is it. And it's not for the select few. This is for everybody. I could do some of the wonderful things I had done before, but it was now for an employee-owned company. So I moved clear across the country
to New Ulm,
Mobile, Alabama to New Ulm, Minnesota. Now, nobody told me that the winters were as brutal.
It was -7 this morning, right, Heather?
In Minnesota, and I'm still trying to acclimatize. But let me back up a bit and tell you, I grew up in Jamaica.
Oh, cool.
Grew up in Jamaica, moved to the US some 27 years ago. I shared with you that my background is international finance. So, I have an MBA from Oxford and obtained the chartered certified accountant designation. I was all about finance and operations and all that.
Were you always interested in numbers? Like, what's your passion?
Which is why I did what I did and I was good at it.
Yeah. What was your passion and why did you gravitate towards numbers?
I've always just liked numbers. I think it's because my dad was an accountant too, right? So I kind of like that, but it's also a way to think through solving problems. To me, it was just solving problems by understanding the numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
The numbers tell a story and they help you understand what's going on. And if you are a good one, you can interpret those numbers and know what exactly needs to be done. So it was a great start for me in accounting and business. But then I fell in love with operations too, right? It was how to bring people together to make things happen. That's what operations is all about.
Well, this is going to be a super fascinating conversation because my passion was operations and then it became finance and then it's a blend of the two. And that's why I'm really excited, like how you got from finance to operations. And then Bill, like one of the conversations that you and I've had over the years of like tying it all together, right? From the people to the value creation to the finances and like how they're like, when I had to go through the family business turnaround and then we sold, it's similar situation where like these are family and friends that I was running the operations for the most part and the visionary. And like, it was devastating when we sold and had to get rid of all those people. And it was like, we're this whole like game of capitalism and understanding cash flow and valuations. I had no idea. It was like revenue, K1, net income, but nothing about like the world that you came from, where private equity has that inserted into their mind because they have to get their internal rate of return for the shareholders.
That's their model, right?
Yep,
their investors are looking for a return and they committed to that return.
Yep. Well, and Heather, here's what I find so fascinating is like, and how I've been trying to like play with this idea is that, the ownership structure will dictate the variation of the game of capitalism that will be played based on the timeline and the cash flow and valuation goals within that timeline. And the objectives, right? So like you have private equity and there's all these different types of private equity now, some more permanent capital, but like they raise their money from investors. And then you have like public companies and VC firms that have different mandates based on equity and cash flow. And then you've got the ESOP, which I'm as we're gonna kind of double click within that the context of where you landed now. But like with a lot of the clients that I have or the people that Bill works with, the owner operator that has a company, they have to clearly articulate this. So even though like the way I like to describe it is like I was playing this game, but I didn't know it. And so what happened is all of a sudden at the Super Bowl of my life, it was just like, wait a second, what the hell game are we playing? It was the checkers versus chess of like, hey, I didn't know what cash flow or like internal rate of return or valuations or deal structures then that was. So I say that because within the wrapper of like where you have been, you've played into a couple different versions of this game, and then you landed into the ESOP, which is shareholder value for all of the employees over time, which is interesting because I think that setup allows for like what Bill does and what you're gonna, or as we unpack, become rocket fuel if you get that structure with the alignments there.
Absolutely. And, private businesses, family-owned business, owner-operators, they often operate with the very same culture, same values, right? It's about family. It's about holding everyone and doing what's best for the people who help you build your wealth. You'd be surprised how similar the family-owned business is to an ESOP. It's all about sharing, though. It's about sharing and making sure everybody has a stake.
What's really fascinating too is like I find that like a lot of my clients, as the owner ends up succeeding, they end up feeling guilty that they're making a bunch of money. That's like one of the like it's either like this kind of weird polar vortex or polar opposite of like there's guilt of like I'm making too much money through distributions, this company's growing. Or it's like I'm entitled to this, which is a whole different dynamic that I don't think we relate to. But like I think it's interesting is I agree with you, and like where I've tried to find a place in this marketplace is like the problem with like when someone converts to an ESOP. Were you there? Like, did you help the conversion, or was it already?
No, I came after it was already an ESOP. Right.
Because I find
it became an ESOP in 1998. They started.
That's right. You said 2015.
And I didn't join the company until 2015, late 2015. But here's the kicker. I joined the company as a CFO. And I was quite okay with just coasting to retirement, making it my last stop. That was my plan. But the stars weren't aligned with my plan. And so about 4 months into my stint with the company, the board kind of tapped me on the shoulder and asked me to take the reins. But I did not know exactly what they had up their sleeves.
Well, Heather, it wasn't just tap you on the shoulder. They laid off your entire executive leadership team.
That's what I mean.
Who was on the board, Heather? Like, was it? Because there's a lot of times
all outside directors, right?
Okay.
So part of the governance of an ESOP is ensuring that you have a board and there's a trustee who looks out for the benefit of the employees. And so this was an outside board, but they were unhappy. And I mean, if I could just describe for you what it looked like.
Yeah, please do.
9 out of our top 10 customers were unhappy. Right. Some of them were actually looking.
What was the business doing before you keep going? What does the business do? Yeah.
So Windings builds electric motors and electric motor components for specialized applications. So you would find our custom motors not in household appliances, ceiling fans, vacuum cleaners. That's not where we play. Our motors, however, would land a vehicle on Mars. Or
kind of a big deal.
Satellite communications.
In New Ulm, Minnesota. I love it.
Yeah, military or commercial jets, right?
That's awesome.
It has to be a mission critical application and highly custom. And by custom, I mean precision engineering. It's got to deliver a certain level of performance. So where performance and size matters, that's where we play best. So we're talking about working with customers who have an environment that has hazards, with either extreme temperatures or really, really cold or hot, very wet. But these environments require high design and engineering motors.
Yeah, that's
right?
fantastic.
And so
Very skilled
So
people.
high skill, high talent. More than half of the people who work for our company are engineers.
Wow.
They have to be, right, to work in this space. So these critical applications, sometimes we don't even think about it, but yes, it requires movement. So we build these electric motors and components that help our customers with, these specialized needs.
And you had 9 out of 10 of your customers unhappy.
They were ready to go crazy. There were 7 senior leaders on the team when I joined the company as the CFO. And within 6 months, there were 2 of us left.
Did you have any idea that was coming?
No, I had no idea. But, the board had a lot of confidence, I guess, in me.
Obviously.
Because I was 6 months with the company and they handed it to me. But I would not recommend that course of action for anyone because it really made it very difficult for us to pull things back together, which meant that I had to set about hiring a new team. But I also found a culture that had somehow deteriorated over time. The ownership now became what I called entitlement. It became about the individuals within the ESOP versus, the company as a whole.
Yeah.
And so we had to address some of those things, in addition to addressing the fact that leadership needed to be brought on board. I needed to assemble.
So Heather, a couple clarifying questions on that. So how was the cash flow position of the company?
Oh, don't talk about that.
That's all I talk about because not
as strong as it should be in an employee-owned company, because employee-owned companies do generate cash because they, if they are a sub-S,
they don't pay any taxes.
Then
Fantastic.
It's actually deferred, right? So it's when there's a distribution taken that the taxes are paid.
Distributions, just for clarification, the distributions of the employee who retired or quit.
Correct.
So it's
Correct.
So it's yep. Correct. I just want to make sure because I'm a big geek on ESOPs and it's part of my workshop. So, but I think it's important because even though you're not paying any income taxes, there's still a cash flow issue. And then also some more context I was curious on is, so juggling cash flow is always part of the dynamic of a leader like yourself. And I think that's important to note the constraints. Like when we were talking before we hit record, understanding that there are constraints, right? You can't just go do whatever you want because you have to deal with a certain amount of constraints, but they're within the spirit of the whole. And then you had said that you've got some entitled employees, or there was more entitlement for the individual. Was there any great game of business, open book management? But what was the previous? Obviously, the leadership team was not doing something right.
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, it wasn't all bad. I mean, employee ownership. You had highly engaged employees and so on. But if it's not nurtured,
right,
and if employees are not, if we're not helping them to understand truly what's required of them and the expectations, then they just do what they think they ought to do. Right?
Yeah, which could breed into that self-entitlement.
Exactly. We're employee owned. So I should be able to vote on who we hire, when we hire, or when we make investments and things like that. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's really educating employee owners what ownership really means. Right.
Yeah.
In our setting, what does it really mean? And so that was part of what we had to address. But
Heather, if it's okay, can you tell the story about when you brought in one of your top customers to review what was happening on the shop floor with their product?
So part of what we do, Ryan, we help Ferrari with its energy recovery systems for the high performance race cars. If
That's
you're a
awesome.
Formula One geek, then you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We're going 13 seasons without a failure. But about I think it was probably, just after I had joined, they were here. And of course, that's part of their development for the future seasons. And every year they push the limits on their designs, as you can imagine. But we had some operators who were working with them, and they weren't quite finished at the end of the workday. So the operators made the decision to stay with them. That was the right decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the next morning, their supervisor wrote them up. They dared to incur overtime without getting approval.
Oh my
I was
gosh.
livid when I heard that. Because you can't punish the employee for making the right decision for the customer.
Right.
I understand, but they were just coming from the wrong base for that decision, right? The basis for that decision was totally wrong. And so those were some of the things we had to correct.
What was it? And without obviously naming any names, it doesn't matter. But like, because I actually ended up turning around a toxic culture too, Heather. Like, I mean, honestly, like the family business, when I joined 115 people, like I didn't want to have beers with more than half the people. Like it was just gross. I mean, so like, but there's like this weird thing, and like Bill and I have talked about culture, and he's systematized it, right? Which what I love about what he has worked on with the leadership process. But there's like, it happens over time, and it's these subtle things that like, so what would you have described as like the culture or the DNA that allowed that to be something that happened?
I think over time we were so proud of being employee owned, and the message kept coming to everyone was, you are great. It is you've done a wonderful job for the business. You are wonderful. And very soon the customer was no longer the focus. The focus became employees.
And then what does it translate then? Because like, I think also when I've watched and worked with other ESOPs, we're like, I mean, it's like you said, it's about educating about equity and ownership versus operations and understanding the two differences of that. We're like, people that don't understand that, it's just all cost cutting. So does it come into like, I mean, like I have a family member that works at an ESOP, and like they just do not understand this stuff, and it's everything is against the net income. I'm like, it's the stupidest thing ever versus normalized EBITDA or the multiple or something like that. So like, does it come down to like, don't take the client out to dinner because it's expensive?
We're saving money, and that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, it did. When we made the first decision to invest in a larger building so we could accommodate everyone. We were operating out of 4 aging buildings, all within 4 miles of each other.
Oh my gosh.
That is inefficient, right? And then I have engineers going from one building to the next throughout the day. And when customers came, we were taking them from one building to the other just to try to piece together, the story. It was highly inefficient. So when we first announced that we were going to invest in a building that would then bring us all together, I almost had mutiny. People were like, no, you can't use the money to do that.
Oh, yeah.
Why can't we invest in our own growth? We have to grow, right? ESOPs have to grow to deliver on the commitments we've made. So it's kind of educating folks about what is business? What is it like running a business, and what's your part in
Did you explain to them what like cash flow and multiples and EBITDA was?
We have had to do that. That was part of the re-education and training. So there is a transparent culture here where we share everything. Every month we share our financials, we share sales, we share, net income, EBITDA by location, by customer, by industry. But we also focus on, where are we doing really, really well? And what are those things we're not doing so well? And how can you help us turn that around? So
that's awesome.
That has really brought a lot of people to forward, right? They've grown. They're now understanding what it really takes. But we don't survive without our customers, right? We have got to do so. Shifting this focus from an internal focus to more, we serve our customers, and in so doing, we benefit.
I love that. And so I want to kind of tee this up to hear how the lines connect down to like what Bill and how you implement that process. Like, but like I'm curious, Heather, with your experience, I find it very unique. Took me 10 years to understand the finance side after, my journey in the operations, where when you think about like the components of business, you have the ownership goals of cash flow and equity growth, which you've got the ESOP as the structure to point you in the right direction. The finance from your background is seeing the truth of how all the activity is landing on the financials. And where I see the PE firms and like a lot of, big disconnects are, they have no idea how operations work and how the stuff ends up on the financials,
They
right?
are so focused on that bottom line and that EBITDA. Sometimes they are not realizing that the decisions being made internally destroys culture, and that culture is what they need
To grow
deliver
value.
that EBITDA.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that connection sometimes just
Yeah.
isn't there. And I also think it's because of the speed. They want
Yeah.
things done so quickly. They don't have time to nurture
Mm-hmm.
a positive culture.
Yep. It's
There-
almost
there's
like
not
it's
enough
like
time.
yeah. This is I'm just thinking out loud, but it's a maybe a stupid analogy, but it's like in farming when like you have these super fat cows because they inject them with everything because they want to kill them in 24 months versus like, hey, why don't you just let the thing grow up and then like we could, make it food
But
when it
when
makes
you
sense.
don't have those pressures, when you don't
Yeah.
have the pressure of an investor requiring, a certain return by a certain date, then you can make better decisions about your future. And
Mhm.
sometimes those decisions may not be based on profits. Those decisions are probably based on longevity, right?
But longevity creates the profits and the cash flow, the byproduct of the value you're providing.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, and so it's fascinating, Heather. There's this guy that you would really enjoy. His name is Ken Sanjanar. He created this value opportunity profile, which is how to assess the weighted average cost of capital and the company specific risk of a company. And like we've had him on the show quite a few times. And like we the way we got to our last conversation, Heather, is like the free cash flow and the multiple is a byproduct of the value you're providing in the marketplace.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's literally the time you spend delivering goods and services. The byproduct is the free cash flow, but you have to invest in the operations and the people to get that. And that's why I find it. Why I wanted to kind of close the loop on that is your understanding of finance and valuations and operations is what makes that kind of connection. So then, where did you come across Bill, or what's your guys' background where you wanted to supercharge everything that we've been talking about so far?
Every leader, every good leader has a coach, right? They realize that they don't do it on their own. And sometimes you need somebody to bounce your crazy ideas off.
Amen to that.
Right? Or somebody who can really tell you, I don't think you're looking at this the right way. You need that, right? Because often you can't talk to your own team about the things that keep you up.
Yeah, especially especially the person that's in the intersection of operations
Correct.
and ownership
So
and where you're at.
I had joined Bill's peer group.
Oh, nice.
Executive peer group, CEOs. And wow, Bill, 7, 8 years, I think.
Well, yeah, maybe a little more even.
You came to New Ulm, you're like, what the hell is this place? I need to go find some people that I can get to be friends with.
I need to help. I need to find somebody who can help me think through some of these things, right?
That's
I
awesome.
need support outside of this is really where I'm going. And so the benefit for leaders or the encouragement for leaders is seek out that support because you don't know everything. You will never know everything. You don't have all the answers either, right? So I did. I reached out. And, I sat down with Bill and I said, you got to help me here. We have a growth strategy to correct all these things that I just described, right? We have a growth strategy. We want to double our size in every 5 years. We want to, beat the competition. We want to be able to address our lead times and do all those wonderful things, operational excellence. But we did not want to leave the culture the way it was. We believed that we needed a strong social strategy that was just as robust as our growth strategy. And so, Bill, you might want to talk about what you came in and did, but then I had no idea how we were going to do this because I needed to also change the culture because I knew that culture would help drive our growth and the things we wanted to accomplish. I needed to fix that as well.
Hey, Bill, before you jump in, I'm curious how there is. It sounds like you fundamentally knew that, because as we get into, Bill, what you're going to be talking about, like there's this huge assumption that what you just said, Heather, matters a lot. Had you ever had any chance to deploy that thesis or philosophy?
No, because I was starting over every 3 years.
Yeah. So where does this come from? It's
just learning from, what has happened in the past, the learnings that you've had. I've seen how it really worked against the business not to have the most positive culture. I'm also an avid reader. I love reading a lot about leadership and learning how to do it well. And so just bringing all of that into place, like, we've got to address this culture.
Got it.
If
Okay.
we're going to grow, then everybody has to grow with us. And growth there doesn't necessarily mean just financial.
Mm-hmm.
Growth also means grow in person, right?
Yep.
They can be better people. And so Bill came in and we did some brainstorming. Bill, you want to talk about that?
Sure. Just to set it up a little bit, Heather was on this verge of how do we transform the financials of the company. So Heather, I think you had out the door in 4 was one of your operational excellence. You had to get product out the door faster. Because people would pay like a 100% premium almost if you could get it in 4 weeks rather than 14 weeks.
Whoa, there's some revenue.
Oh yeah, and you had which requires a complete re-engineering of engineering, a complete re-engineering of manufacturing. All that had to get done. You wanted to bring new products to your own independent products because you were a job shop, but you didn't own your own IP. So you've done that. You wanted to double the size of the company. And all of that came down to the pinch point was people, right? We have to get the work out the door. And so it was 2020, COVID hit, the riots, George Floyd, all the social unrest, all the lockdowns, all of that was happening. And I spent a lot of time on my deck talking to Heather on her deck. I think while we were trying to figure this out. But Heather basically said what she just said is I need a social strategy. I need a human strategy that is every bit as robust as my growth strategy. And, sometimes these things just come together. But for the previous several years, I had been trying to figure out why traditional leadership development doesn't produce all of the wonderful results that you would expect it to produce, because everybody says it's supposed to be around leadership. Last time I was on, Ryan, we talked about how there's over 57,000 books on Amazon with leadership in the title.
Yep. I love that quote so much.
So it can't be, it's like maybe 100,000 books and we'll get there. I mean, it can't, there's a design flaw and barely 10% of traditional leadership development training actually transfers back into behavior because it's about behavior. It's not about, I thought about leadership in a class. It is, I'm leading in real time with real people.
Yeah.
And so, I
want to ask it because Bill, 100%. And for the listeners, we got Bill's previous episode in the show notes in the link below if you want to go check that out. Heather, so I've been it's been difficult for me to articulate this over the years of because I love what Bill, the process that Bill has created. What I've gathered though is even with my current clients or with my old business, the numbers tell the truth and the game has to be articulated clearly of it is cash flow and multiple as the end game, whatever the timeline is, right? The ownership structure will dictate the timeline, but it's the goal. Then the numbers become the playbook. And I think everything that Bill said could be obviously is true, but without the game and without the financials, it becomes just a subjective political pissing match.
Well, if you're not measuring it, then you're not managing it, right?
You're measuring it, and then it being also the game, right?
If you're not tracking, if you don't have a way of tracking that success,
right?
And how do you know that you're succeeding?
Oh, it feels good, Heather. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
I think it's also, we need to increase productivity. We need to increase throughput. We need to decrease waste. We need, all those. I
want to reduce turnover.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
I want people to stay and be seated and feel welcomed in this place. I want them to be their best because when they are their best, then they can deliver the results that we need.
Right. I agree, Heather. And it's all of that within the context of the financial goals. But then you as the ownership team are determining how fast do you want to go? How much do you want to reinvest? And I say all that because you're measuring as you guys get into some of the results that you've had, those are byproducts of what you've done within the game that you're playing. And I say that because like the goals, like I guess maybe said a different way, Heather, so many people are like that are not PE backed are just driving towards top line revenue, net income. And then everything becomes unraveled because how are you determining what to invest in? And then how do you measure that against something? So I just wanted to bring that up because I love what Bill said, but I think if people don't do what you have discussed already on this call, then they're missing the foundational blocks
because they're so connected, right? And so we keep chasing these results and we aren't getting there, but not realizing that part of the answer, it's not the whole thing, but part of the answer is ensuring that your people who are helping you get there understand their part in all of this. They've got to understand what their contribution is. And we take it for granted that people show up to work and they already know. We take it for granted that managers know how to manage because they read a book. Bill?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. One of the 57,000.
MBA school and MBA taught us how to be good managers. Nah, if that was the case, we would have had excellent results. It doesn't guarantee anything.
Yeah.
The only guarantee we have is when the whole team is rowing in the same direction.
I love it so much.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's a team. It's coordinated effort. It's when we align our activities in the same direction, and that's teamwork. And we talk about teamwork. None of this stuff is a new conversation, but then it's like, well, why don't we have it? Why isn't it working? Why does it take so long to get anything done around here? How come we say we're going to change something and then it doesn't change? How come our priorities keep shifting? Those are some of the things that happen when we don't understand how to coordinate action through a team environment. Because a high-performing team is what we want to solve for. We want the whole team rowing in the same direction. The guy calling out stroke, stroke, stroke. That person's not rowing. It's the team that's making everything happen, and so. As we looked at what was going on at Windings, the turnover, I think, was right around 20% a year.
Yes.
You had some other challenges that we can talk about, financial challenges. I think they lost money the year before you stepped in.
Our stock price took a dive.
Yeah. Oh. So, I mean, all the numbers were suggesting that we weren't behaving in a way. We weren't taking action that was producing the outcome, the results, the financial results. So
customers were about ready to walk.
Yeah. So
it's like you're in a mayday situation, essentially.
Crisis, right? Yeah. So immediately all the numbers were sending off bells, right? I talked earlier about interpreting the results. What are they telling you? What are the results saying? And the financials, that's looking in the rearview mirror because the financials are telling you when things have already gone south. Right?
So we had to change behavior, and you had to change the behavior of 125 people. And we talk about culture. So this is a culture transformation, which sounds like a big scary thing, but it's not. This sounds like change management. I mean, these are the big buzzwords that are out there. It sounds like continuous improvement. It's all those things. But fundamentally, we were solving for why don't we have high-performing teams? What is getting in the way of the team performing at their very, very best? And it's very easy. I mean, Gallup came out with a book, it's the manager, and they lay the whole thing at the feet of the manager saying, you're the problem. You don't know how to build a high-performing team. So great. Thank you very much. I still don't know how. The point is, it's the team that has to learn to play. You don't send a quarterback off to learn to play and then without sending the team to go and learn to play with the quarterback and practice it with the quarterback. And that's what's missing in traditional leadership development. I go think about how to lead, and then I come right back into a team where all the stimulus has got me behaving the way I've always been behaving in the past. And the team doesn't know. I mean, in so many ways, everything that happens in an organization is handoffs. I can't do everything by myself, so I have to hand off. So I hand off, you grab, we go. And it's a handoff of information. It's a handoff of process. It's a handoff sometimes of responsibility. All these things are handoffs. And if you fumble the handoff, that's friction. That's interference. That's waste. Well, you have to teach everybody, okay, in this particular situation, this is what we're trying to accomplish, and here's how we hand off and coordinate our actions so there's no friction. And so that's the foundational philosophy of the leadership process is everybody here is a leader because leaders take action to create a better future. Once we know what the better future is, whether that is, hey, we got to reduce waste, we have to improve throughput, we've got to be faster, whatever we know what the better future is, then we have to take action to get there. And so then we have to remove all the barriers that prevent us. The leadership process is kind of an inverse of how we think. We're not going after engagement. We are getting rid of disengagement.
I mean, like the stat you said in my last, and I don't know if it's made up or not, but it feels exactly right, which is every employee averages 2.5 hours of drama a day. And I'll tell you what, that bullshit sucks. And everybody agrees with that. I don't care what side of it on, like no one enjoys it. And it's like, that's what we want to get rid of. And like when we were talking about atomic habits or theory of constraints for people, it was just like ding, 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 ding. I mean, like, and you're just getting rid of all that.
Names it, Ryan. It's not named within an organization. And so you just say, oh, they're creating trouble, but nobody names it. And then there is no effort to remove it or prevent it. Right. And we all know that it sucks everybody's energy.
Totally. And it just sucks in general because no one wants to like go home. And like, it's like so fascinating because I don't remember who or what system it was, but like, if you want to really know a culture of an organization, ask the spouses of the company.
Yeah.
And we all know it's like, I got thoughts. Trust me, of my wife's company, right? Like I got lots of them. And like, I have only met half the people there, but like, I can tell you there's a lot of the stuff that we're trying to eliminate. And like, but what I find fascinating, Heather, and I'm curious as you guys talk about how you actually implemented this is like, okay, so what I see is kind of like a spectrum of how people deal with this problem from a leadership perspective is like, when I started in the family business, it was super toxic and gross people. My dad had been very distant from the company, Heather. We had a GM running it. And it was just there was so much cash flow in the business to begin with that it hit a lot of sins for a long time. And then I got in there, we lost almost $950,000 in 2009. So like similar situation. It was a total turnaround. But like, so it was the people and the systems that very similar to you. And what I ended up doing that I think a lot of my clients or owner operators resonate with is becoming the glue out of sheer will and time and brute force, which is like, how does every system work? How are we getting sales, operations, and admin out to the bar, out to this, to, you know, it's like you're building this cohesive friend group, but like it's just sheer willpower, which after time, like, and I ended up kind of building systems and processes for that. But that's how I did what your guys are talking about here. And I think about the people that are stuck in their operator role that want to act, because Heather, part of my system is like, extract yourself from the job. So if you want to hire someone for $250 and take your 20, 30 grand in distributions, we have to have a path in the financial model to see like, when can you hire a Heather to get out of that? But so like, there's the financial model and all the value growth strategies that can be done, but then they're the glue of the culture and the operations out of sheer will and might, like we're talking about now. And there's no system to extract that out of it. Does that make sense?
You are so right. Somebody has to champion this. You just can't say, we're going to do this. Now team, go ahead and do it. Bill will tell you, I was from start to finish. Everybody knew Heather was so behind this. This is her expectation, right? I placed myself in every training session we were having, right? And Bill is going to break it down how we had to do it, because it took us about 6 to 8 months to take everybody in our organization through through sessions explaining and breaking down what it means to be on a team. What are the individual's responsibilities? What are the manager's responsibilities? And when there is a problem, how will the team deal with this problem? And you all have responsibility and are accountable for helping this team succeed. It's not just the manager's job. It's also the team member's job. And, we had a lot of aha moments where people were saying, what do you mean? We thought it was the manager's job. The team, the whole team wins together.
Yeah, I think that is one of the things that we misunderstand. You read whatever you want about bad managers, and you can talk about bad managers, and our approach is no. I don't think there's bad managers. I think they're following a bad process. They're following an ineffective process because the level of performance they're getting out of their team, that's the result. That is the result of the process they're using. Just like quality is the result of a quality process, and scrap is the result of an ineffective quality process. So we just took this, like you said, it's the theory of constraints for people. What's preventing you from being more successful? Let's just open up that constraint. It is atomic habits because it's changing behavior. If you don't change the behavior, and if it doesn't stay changed, then again, it's just like, oh, well, that was a nice warm bath. It felt great. But now
it's summer camp, right? We were done with summer camp. Heather went on vacation. Now I could be an asshole to my colleagues again.
So let me give you an example of what Bill is talking about, right? We taught everyone not to accept unclear directives. Everyone.
Oh, cool.
And how often we end up with a reject or something not going the way it should because we didn't quite understand, but we were afraid to ask for clarity, but we went about it anyway. Because I don't want to ask the manager again what I'm supposed to do. I'm just going to do what I think I ought to do. But after we went through training everybody, say, it's okay for you to say, I don't understand. Help me because I don't want to create a problem. I need clarity. All of a sudden, you have empowered them to ask that question. They're not afraid anymore.
And I'm about to make a promise and a commitment, and you're going to hold me to that commitment. So I better negotiate absolute clarity of the outcome so that I know what the heck it is that I'm committing to. And so that that's good for your soul. And it enriches, it makes you stronger because it takes courage to go against that social norm of, well, you're the boss. I don't want to look stupid. I'm not going to ask that stupid question. But the boss is going to hold you to a bad outcome, and then they're going to make up a story about you. So this is how adults have conversations and how we make agreements. And this is in probably 56,000 of the 57,000 books that are out there, but that doesn't mean people know how to do it.
Well, and I think, there's Bill, you and I talked about it, I think in one of our calls, we're like, there's this base assumption that I think people are inherently good. Yeah, there is sociopaths, but they're like 5% of the population, right? And so people are inherently good and they generally want to try hard and they generally want more autonomy and freedom to do the best that they can. But I was telling you, Heather, my daughters are 8 and I got to put the guardrails in. Here are the guardrails. You can play within the guardrails. So right. But I got to nudge you. That's the job of the parent. And I'm not saying that we're parents for employees, but you providing the goal, the clear structure, and then the guardrails. Right. And it's, it's really fascinating, you guys. I'm curious if you're, if you're going to follow my, my example here, my story. So when you talk about clear expectations, so I am an insane user of GPT and OpenAI. I hate doing shit. I use it for everything and it gets better every day. And guess what? I'm not clear most of the time. And I have to go back and repeat myself because I'm oh, by the way, I had no idea that what I said.
Employees have the same thing. You think they understand and they didn't. You didn't.
And it was my fault, not their fault, right? It's my fault.
But when you empower them to say, I'm not clear on that, can you repeat it? Or they say, I need more information. They're setting themselves up to succeed by doing so. But we're also making it okay for them to ask those questions.
You're not asking GPT to lie for you because you want it in one response, right? I mean, it's so fascinating how it's similar. So Heather, what is the process that you guys, because I'm continuing to hammer this home every time I talk to Bill, where like it's changing an entire culture and change like that we're talking about seems daunting, but you said 6 to 8 months, and through the Atomic Habits kind of philosophy in quotes, like it's bite-sized chunks, but there's like a rhythm. So like, how did you actually tackle this in a way where you had to, the result is that you extracted yourself from being.
First of all, when there is a problem, remember I said, we bring everybody together. It's important to get everybody involved in turning something around. It's not going to happen because I said it. It happens because everybody gets the vision, they believe we can do something about it, and they are on board. So we brought everybody together. And Bill, you remember when we first said, hey, we know we have a problem. We had done an engagement survey. First time we were doing it. We wanted to know, where are we? How do we measure where we are today? And we use the Gallup Q12, right? So Gallup is an expert at surveys. They know how to engage, to tell you whether or not your employees are engaged. And it really wasn't great. It told us what we already knew. But now we have a baseline. And we share the results with everyone. We say, this is what you said. You said we stink at this. You said we're good at this. Now let's pick the ones that we want to work on. And we brought together, we asked for volunteers across the company. This is how it all started. And Bill, you want to talk about how many we ended up with?
Yeah, I think you have 125 employees roughly. And we just said, hey, anybody who wants to be part of a focus group to review the results of the survey and figure out where to go. 40 people showed up out of 120. So there was energy around fixing it.
So what did you guys do to, because like, I want that to be the outcome for anybody listening in, but like, you know, if you've got to like, I mean, if I would have done that with my company when I first started, people would have been like, middle finger, F you, Ryan, like you're like, it just took so like, how did you, like, what was the attitude?
I'll walk you through it.
Okay. So, you understand why I'm asking that?
We broke it down in 2 or 3 groups, and we just went through the survey material and we just asked questions, and we just listened, and people were saying, I don't feel recognized. I don't feel heard. I don't think anybody really cares about my personal development. And some of the recognition was as simple as, COVID had happened, is I had my 5-year anniversary and I didn't get my $25 gas card. I mean, it was like, really? That? Yeah, because it just it fell through the cracks. It was stuff, sometimes it was as simple as that. But most of it was, people don't listen to my contributions. I don't have a voice in improving things around here. And so those were some of the things that came out of the Gallup Q12. But
Heather, Bill, maybe you got some thoughts on Heather's leadership here. Like, what did you do to make people vulnerable enough to trust the survey? Okay,
I had to be vulnerable.
Right.
I had to let them know as the leader that I see that something is wrong here.
Okay.
And we want to hear from you what you think is wrong.
Okay. Very helpful.
We need you to help us name it, because we are all feeling it. And so it started out with me saying, I know something's wrong. I want you to tell me and help me fix it, Bill, because I can't do it on my own. So I think the vulnerability had to start with me.
Got it. Very helpful.
Well, and that's really what adults do, is we just say, I'm not perfect. In fact, that's one of the foundational beliefs of the leadership process, is we are fallible human beings. So that means the best we can ever be is fallible. And so if we are in fact not perfect, then why do we expect perfection when I give you a task to do and then it doesn't come through the right way? Well, is it because there's something wrong with you or something wrong with the process we're using? And so we just tried to identify the processes that would minimize the fallibility of human beings, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Wherever humans are fallible, let's put in a better process. Let's just keep thinking about, what are the half a dozen things that a high-performing team would have to be good at? And then let's teach that so that our own fallibility doesn't screw us up. And so I love the fact, Heather, that you think it was only 6 or 8 months. It was almost a year and a half. Um, but if it's a process, it's forever, right? And so you don't do gap accounting once, you do it forever.
Well, you're building the habits like we've talked about, right, Bill?
Exactly.
And what is culture? Culture is what you're talking about every day. Culture are the things that you do, right? And what people are talking about. So taking all that feedback from the groups, the different groups, we said, okay, now we have some direction. Now we know what it is we need to work on. We can't work on everything at the same time, but how do we lay out a program here that gets people involved? Because they said they didn't have any input. We want them involved. We're going to be transparent. We're making them a part of the process, but at the same time, we're setting new expectations. How do I get a whole program that brings that about? And that was our leadership process. And we had to dissect the entire organization. So 125 people. We're in one location at the time, but we didn't want leaders leading these sessions with our employees. We wanted leaders to sit in the sessions just like everybody else. And we asked our employees, especially the ones who were already informal leaders, to be leaders in these groups. And Bill, you want to talk about how you did the whole train the trainer before they went in there and led these sessions?
So Bill, before you jump in, so like Heather, what I'm hearing there is you're minimizing or stamping out the power dynamic in how you just, right? Correct. So in order to enable what Bill is about to describe, is that a fair way to put it?
Because if not, I don't think we would have had the engagement we had. We wouldn't have had the input and people feeling free to talk because the power dynamic was there and it was already not great. So we had to remove that and make it a level playing field.
Well, because I'm thinking about this family member, and it's like, what a shame. They talk about the waste is like coming home and saying, my boss is wrong, but it's just not worth it. Not worth it because, like, you know what? Like, there's just projecting of what is right. And it's like, it's just, what a shame, right? Like, but then to have everybody sit and have a good conversation is a way different thing versus just the it's not worth it comment, which is just waste.
So you're actually, this is where it starts. Ryan, if you believe that it doesn't matter what I do, it's not going to change, then people aren't going to take any action. And so we actually start the process. I'll jump into this. So basically, we went through Heather's organization and we handpicked people that she and her manager said, this is a strong individual contributor. They're an informal leader. People respect them. And we asked them if they would be facilitators. And we teamed them up in groups of 2 because they'd never done it before. And they just needed the camaraderie of another person being up there. And they facilitated a conversation. They didn't train anybody. The training were 6 and 10 minute videos that we created around the specific topics that we wanted to address. Everybody watched the videos and then had a conversation around it, because adult learning is, first I have to understand it, then I have to accept it or reject it. And if I reject it, we're done. But if I accept it, then I have to apply it and practice it. And then over repetition, I'll learn how to make that work. And so that's the adult learning model that was built into all of this. The facilitators, their job was just facilitate a conversation. So there was workbooks and handouts that people just sort of worked through a series of questions. Well, what do you think about if we were going to make and keep really big promises, what prevents us from doing that? And then people would talk about, well, I don't want to look like an idiot, so I don't always get clarity. And little by little, they would come up with what we already knew they were going to land on is, well, we have to negotiate clarity.
Or I didn't really know because the other department didn't tell me, and the communication wasn't great. And okay, so that's a problem. And they would note all the problems. Now, what do we do about those things as a team? How can we fix that? Right?
Heather, oh, sorry, one sec, Bill. I was like, so like, Bill, every time we've talked about this, like it's like, I find it so fascinating, Heather, we're like, what Bill just described is so ridiculously simple. It's like, I mean, again, my daughters are 8 and it's like, this is how we do things, right? And it's like, and I have empathy tattooed on my arm for a reason. That's what that says. It's like, because I'm either too empathetic or it's a light switch. And then I'm just like completely like, this is ridiculous. And like, as a leader doing this, the patience you must have? I mean, it's worth it.
Actually, I'm not a very patient person. I am not. I have had to learn, however, that everybody doesn't move at the same pace.
Yeah.
And I had to listen to what I was hearing from our employees.
How did you handle that dynamic with yourself?
I got on blood pressure meds. That's a little secret there, right? Because it was just against my grain. Remember where I'm coming from. Everything was just quick and fast.
I know.
This is how we were going to do it. But now I had to learn that I'm working with people, and to change a culture doesn't happen overnight.
Thank you for sharing that.
I have to be consistent, and deliberate, right? In order to bring about a change.
What was it like being in these meetings? Because like I resonate with your style, but I also learned the hard way that I have to freaking slow down. They used to call it the Tansom target at my old company. Like I would make a decision like, I'm totally firing you, and like this is just a matter of time, and I'm just either not going to talk to you or I'm just going to come in and it's just like I've had enough. But like that doesn't work, and I learned that the hard way is my point. So like I've had to smooth out those edges, and like, because like you're right, like what Bill's talking about is the right approach, but then like it's this weird dynamic of like but you counter.
Have to learn, right? Everybody has to learn, and a leader needs to adapt, and especially where you want to bring about change. Remember our goal. Our goal is to change the culture, and so it takes time, and you have to invest in it, and you have to be consistent. Consistency is such key.
Well, and we're saying things like change the culture, but it's changing behavior and changing human behavior, especially in an environment where you're stimulated by other humans all around you. Like, how do you get everybody to change? Now, in some ways, it's easier because if the herd starts moving to the left, you just move to the left. So sometimes it's easier.
That's the tipping point, right? Like, there's probably this, like, as it starts to like procreate and like almost like I'm just thinking of like a fractal. It's like going throughout the organization, and you start to get that critical mass where like I'm assuming
it's infectious. After a while, everybody starts saying, "Oh, those guys are doing it, and it worked for them. We should try it too in our team." And that is why we had cross-functional teams. So the teams weren't just departments. We cut across the organization, so they were working with people from different teams and departments in solving these problems. Right.
Yeah, and that was on purpose. That was for several reasons. One, we wanted to, again, break the power dynamic. If you've got a bunch of hardened workmen, maybe they're all welders or something, and you start to explain, hey, how we're going to talk about giving feedback, like, oh, that's not going to go over, right? But if you take one welder and you put them in
one marketing, one admin, one sales.
Suddenly it's like, okay, I don't have that power dynamic. Now I'm willing to listen. And oh, by the way, I'm really curious about what goes on in finance. I'm really curious about how engineers, because we have these rivalries inside of the organization, these silos. And so it starts to break down. Who do you trust? You trust the people you know. Well, suddenly when I know people across the company, and I start to build some relationships.
And I start hearing maybe similar concerns, but I also start hearing, oh, that's why they do what they do.
Right.
I never understood it before.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, they're beginning to learn how the organization works. And they're also understanding the constraints that exist elsewhere. And the things that we would tell ourselves suddenly starts to dissipate. Oh, that's not how engineering does it. Oh, if they don't get that bit of information, no wonder when I get it, it doesn't seem to connect.
Yeah.
Right. They suddenly start to understand how the organization really works and the challenges across the board. So I thought that brought to the forefront, that everybody needed to be more empathetic, try to understand what's going on in other areas. Don't just draw a conclusion. You know,
Well,
that was pretty evident.
well, it's really interesting. It's empathetic of the constraints, how we even started this conversation, right? Which is empathetic of like Heather in marketing or accounting or whatever, or service, or whatever, has to deal with these things for all of us to accomplish this. So you're making the best choices you can. And then it's also like, you know, you mentioned trust, and, you know, David Horsager wrote this book, The Trust Edge. And like, I mean, so many things, but especially probably the situation that you came from, Heather, with the timeline and how fast. I mean, like you just all of a sudden trust goes to the wayside, and you're built like that cross-functional, getting rid of all that drama and increasing empathy increases trust as a byproduct of it.
99% of decisions were made by the top leaders, and it didn't matter what the rest of the team were saying. You didn't have time to go consult with them. You didn't have time to bring them in. You were just put there to make the decisions and make it happen. In this model that we're talking about, it's quite different. We're saying the teams need to be involved in fixing the issues. The teams need to be involved in addressing the challenges, because guess what? Heather doesn't see everything. She can't.
And to make it and honestly, like, this is why I love the ESOP setup, to make it a sustainable business over time. It can't be about Heather or Bill or Ryan or anybody. The machine has to go whether we're there or not.
Absolutely.
Well, you know, we have a process we follow to get quality. We have a process we follow to get our books to balance at the end of the month. We have a process for everything, but why don't we have a leadership process? Why don't we have a way of taking action together and coordinating action? And so that cross-functional learning cohort that Heather is describing, we picked that so that, well, partly people are just curious. They really want to know what's going on in the other departments because there's so much kind of gossipy stuff. They want to know that. But also, the reason we did cross-functional is because then we only take one person out of manufacturing and one person out of sales and one person out of, you know, the warehouse. We don't shut down any department while we're doing this. It's only 1 hour of talking about this new idea of making and keeping big promises, or giving each other constructive feed-forward suggestions, or reducing drama, or continuous improvement of a process, whatever the topic of the month was. That was the safe place to explore it. And then, to Heather's point, everybody went back to their normal teams, and they had all had slightly different conversations. And then they come together and say, okay, for our team, what would continuous improvement look like? For our team, if we were going to remove frustration and interference from our workday, what would that look like? And so we asked everybody this question every single month. What could we as a team, knowing what we know now about making and keeping promises, or whatever the topic was, knowing what we know now, what could we do? What should we do? What must we do to make our job easier, more productive, or more fun? And nobody ever argues with that. It's like,
but you were also providing tools, right?
Yeah.
Just we're teaching everybody these things, but then they walked away with a tool that they could use. So going back to your teams, there was, I still remember when we did the topic, I over-report my status. What does that mean? I keep my manager informed as to how I'm doing with that thing I committed to. And we weren't getting that feedback, right? Because it wasn't naturally what employees do. But now we've made that very clear that you need to do that. And by the way, here's a tool that you're going to use every week. You're going to do 315. We call it the 315. 3 questions. Answer 3 questions in 15 minutes at the end of a week. How did my goal go this week? What challenges did I have? Where do I need help?
I have to say, Bill, like, that comment on our group call, like, everyone's like, that was gold. The 315 was like so earth-shattering.
Simple, but it improves communication, and it helps you, the manager, now understand from the employee's perspective what the challenges are, or what do I need to help them with so they can succeed. so that I don't hear 90 days from now that they did not meet that goal. I'm having this check-in with them frequently. And by the way, as a result of doing that check-in frequently, we no longer do an annual performance review.
Yeah. We just randomly blessed from heaven.
Hallelujah.
Everybody dreads an annual performance review. And
everyone
use people to a number, a score.
Yeah.
Really? Over a whole year, and then they come down to a score. Why didn't they get this feedback from month 2, month 3, month 4, when they could have done something about it? We wait till the end of the year to tell them that they did a bad job.
Isn't it so insane? And then well, everyone does it. And like, I got friends where he's got 18 employees. He's in a software implementation, ERP implementation. Oh my God, he's got his opinions about it. And then I got family members who are employees who are getting reviews.
Don't do it.
I know.
It's a suck of time and energy, and nobody likes it. And the employee does not enjoy it either.
Yeah. So well, then Heather, how many times did you have bonus programs too? Because then I see what exacerbates the situation. It's like, I'm going to give you a score once a year, and then I'm going to randomly subjectively give you a bonus.
We did away with that.
Toxic. I know.
With that. We now have weekly check-ins. We have a quarterly conversation where the manager says, hey, you did a great job with your goal. You met your goal. You didn't. Let's talk about what your goals are going to be for the next quarter. That's the conversation.
Do you run EOS or Traction or something?
We now have quarterly. Yeah, we use Traction too.
Okay, so you have like a cadence. Okay.
The bonuses are not annual. They're quarterly.
I like it. More
frequent, right? More frequent feedback.
Are you willing to share just like what are the KPIs? Because I like the fact that you're an ESOP. Everybody's working towards
this. We got a ton of them.
But what are the KPIs for bonuses? Like I've got
they are for every department it's different. So whatever that department is working, of course there is a portion of your bonus is tied to the company's results, right? The performance. But a portion of it is tied to your team's success. Because remember, we're driving this whole leadership process, which is all about your team's success. So at the end of every quarter, did your team achieve the goal that your team set out to achieve?
Yeah, you mind me?
I want them to have no more than 2, maximum 3 goals.
Okay.
For the team.
Do you mind me double clicking on this just for a second? Because I think what you are doing with Bill and how all this stuff ties in together with the EOS case, like there's so many things that you're doing. I guess, Heather, to my point, right? That I'm essentially trying to work like that. That's all integrated into my owner's playbook that I created, because you got the goals set up. You got the financial clarity, you got the leadership process, you're implementing with EOS. So like there's all, and then you got your board meeting. So there's all these different cadences to kind of get everybody rolling in the right direction. And the bonus thing is part of my process that I find fascinating, because I've been working a lot with executive level bonuses of like short-term versus long-term phantom stock and all that stuff. But then when you get into rank and file, and I don't mean that in any derogatory way, just the employees, do you allocate like a percentage of EBITDA or gross profit that is allocated to the different departments?
There's a budget. There's a pool, right? We have a budgeted pool.
Do you mind is a percentage of something like that?
So every assembler on the floor can earn 10% of their wages each quarter if they achieve their numbers. So everybody has a number in this business. We call it management by the numbers, right? It's a great game of business.
Okay.
And that number that they're tracking is tied to their team's performance, but also tied and aligned with the company's corporate goals.
Love it.
Well, okay. Heather, talk about the actual increase in productivity, because I think you were at 77% of
when we started.
Yeah. 77% of your standard rate.
We had to set the baseline, because if you're going to go on a journey, you start with where do I want to go, and you will measure how well you do, right, on your way there. Well, in our case, we measure productivity, which is really how much work we get out within the work hour. And when we started in 2020, we were at 77% productivity. And it's just a hockey stick over the years.
Define productivity. Like, what are the metrics that go into productivity? Is it labor utilization, or is it like
So that is a part of it, but it's really how much good product do you get out in the labor hour?
Okay.
That's productivity, right?
Okay.
And we were at 77%, and we went up to over 99% this past year.
Whoa.
Yep.
99.
The focus is on, yeah.
Oh, sorry. It's 99.8 as of June of 2024. And that's 2 years after we quote unquote ended the process, but you don't end the process. You never end the process. You just keep it going.
And our turnover, Bill mentioned to you, we measure, well, are people staying? Are people engaged and staying with the business? So we measure turnover, right, as our retention. And we were at 20% in 2020.
Before we
and
started.
a lot of people tell me, well, that's not bad for manufacturing. Well, it's bad for employee ownership and doing what we do. That's bad. I don't want to lose people after investing so much in training and development. And this past year, it was under 5%.
Wow. I bet you if you walked into I mean, you've probably got your own gut feel on this, Heather, but it's probably palpable the energy of your company now compared to.
Yes. So we have a lot of what I call blue chip customers that we work with. We work with NASA. We work with the military. We have some big companies that come through all the time. And every time they visit, it's one thing we know, the feedback is off the charts. Your people are so engaged. Your people are so productive. They ask the right questions. We can tell they're interested in doing this. So for us, employee ownership has also spurred growth in our business and customer retention, because they come and they experience that. You walk through our plant, you experience it, you feel it.
Let me jump in here just for a second, because your Gallup Q12 scores, your engagement scores, I believe, have more than doubled over the years. And Gallup says Gallup says if you double your engagement, wherever you start, if you double it, you're going to see 147% improvement in your bottom line. Heather, have you seen anything like that?
300%.
Whoa. Wow. So cool.
But even when times are tough, so, we make a lot of components for commercial aerospace, and everybody knows what happened to Boeing this past year, right? The challenges they've had. Great company. I'm sure they will get out of it, but it meant that they weren't building as many 737s as they did in the past.
Yeah, right.
And we build components that are destined for these 737s. And it was about 20% of our business.
Whoa.
Okay. So of course we had to take some action internally and move. And even when we were doing that, our engagement score were going up.
Isn't that fun? Isn't it fun to have that experience?
Right. Even at a time where we didn't quite hit the number we wanted to hit because of all these external factors, people were still feeling like, hey, it's a great place to be.
Well, and are you seeing that, Heather? Because I experienced this too, where I think we got to a place kind of like what you were talking about. But it was out of sheer will. It was just so much work compared to a system like you guys are talking about. But even in the hard times when you're rolling the same direction like that, people are not blaming each other. They're going hey, this happened to Boeing, right? It's not Heather's fault or Bill's fault. There's just a lot more adults in the room.
Some of the questions that I get. So I have this thing every month. We do a company meeting. By the way, we generated so much cash that we started buying other companies.
I love it.
We bought a business in California, Moore Park, California. And last year we bought one in San Diego with operations across the border in Mexico.
Yeah, some nice little.
I'm about to do a third one, Bill. And so I don't know how we're going to do it, but we try to bring them all into this monthly meeting that we have where we talk about how we did the prior month. We're transparent with our financials. We explain to everybody. We celebrate, when we have things to celebrate. And, when it happens, we're just very transparent with our people. We say, hey, this is what's happening. So you're all going to have to help us kind of control our spending when something like this happens, right? Because this is what ownership means. This is your part of it. You're going to help me. And we ask for ideas as to how we can cut costs. You'd be surprised how many people came up with all kinds of
Good
different
ideas.
ideas
Yeah.
about cutting
Yeah.
costs. Hey, we could do this. Hey, we could do that. What about this?
Yeah.
They also have a I wish I knew why, which is a staple in our monthly meeting where anybody can ask me a question
I
about
wish
the
I knew why.
business.
That's fantastic. That's awesome.
And you'd be surprised the kind of questions they ask, right? Have we thought about, exploring some other segments down, in oil and gas? What about geothermal? I was like, where are these questions coming from? You'd be surprised people have such an interest in the business. Yeah.
Okay, so this is all fantastic. I've got an interesting line of question here is, so it sounds like you're having fun. I would be having fun if I were you. So it sounds like you're having fun, and obviously things are still up and down. It's entrepreneurship. But Heather, like, bear with me as I get this thought out because I think this is an interesting. So the people that are listening in and that are my clients again are like very similar to my father and I. Like we were owner operators, right? And then what happens is because they don't have an ownership playbook, and you had that mindset with the finance and the ownership capitalism game that like we talked about coming in. So I've got a component of that. Then you had been, you got EOS, you got the leadership process, and you got open book management. I'm hearing all these systems you're putting into place to get everybody rolling in the direction, to create the experience that you've been so kind to share. I have a fundamental belief that a lot of times people so I've had 2,500 people go through my owner operator workshops. And a lot of times that people hit the eject button, like this Bo Burlingham, who wrote the book Finish Big, talks about, is because they're super tired. And then they go, try to sell to a PE firm or sell to a third party. When realistically, I am like the people that resonate with me, that resonate with my mission, like want to do what you're doing, which is focus on strategy. They want to be the visionary, but they're stuck in all of this minutia because they're not connecting all these dots. Therefore, it makes it more difficult for them to either A, actually do an ESOP because the cash flow valuation isn't where they need to be when they're so tired. Heather, that's like what ends up happening. People, I'm like, just do it, well, you just do an ESOP. They're like, well, I can't because they're stuck. And that's actually the primary factor. So selling to a third party or a bolt-on or an ESOP or to a PE firm is the way to actually get rid of the operations that's so exhausting to them. But they have the soul and spirit of what you resonate with as well. So there's this disconnect where they don't have as many options. Yet what I think is fixable, and back to what my fundamental belief is, if we put the systems and processes in place like you're talking about, the operational succession and the actual time investment that's needed from a leader like you, can you explain to me, like, in the people listening, like your time involvement and where you spend your time? And it's probably like, it just, if you understand the kind of the question, because it's like you're focused on the future and M&A and strategy, but like I'm assuming your time involvement and your time dynamic and what you're spending your time on is a lot different now than it was 4 years ago.
Certainly. Because now, then I spent a lot of time on it, right? That was my focus, right?
Yeah.
My focus was on the business versus, rather in the business versus on the business.
Right.
So we spent a lot of time, but I felt like it was fundamental. If that did not happen, I would not get time to work on these other things that I'm working on today, which is growth and acquisitions and so on. I couldn't do it then. I had to fix that first. And then, having a team, the team has to buy in to it because after they've adopted it, they keep it going. Now, I do try every now and again to ensure that I signal my commitment to it and that, I support it. So every month we do a book club with the leaders
Yeah.
and managers,
Yeah.
and we talk about all the good management practices, right? So we keep the conversation going, but it's not the same time commitment as it was 5 years ago.
Hey, Heather, do you resonate with this analogy? So I wrote this book called The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham. Have you ever heard that? It's The Road Less Stupid. We don't want to pay the dumb tax. It's a fantastic book, but he explains this, and it's this experience that you just mentioned where you're focused on strategy and shareholder growth and on the business, which is where I think most of my clients and the listeners want to be, but they don't know how. And that's why I'm trying to build this playbook so I can say, hey, focus on these things to get there. But Keith Cunningham talks about, like, there's no such thing as a passive business. Like, and he's like, yeah, that you pay the dumb tax if you believe that. But what he talks about is this merry-go-round. If you're at the playground, it takes a lot of work to spin that thing. And then if you walk away, it's going to stop. But if you keep it going, you can tap it
up such that others can help you keep it going.
Right. And then you can just tap it.
Focus on acquisitions, because now everybody wants to know, Heather, when are we going to do the next acquisition? Because it has really benefited our business. Right. But I need time to go work on that. Yeah. And to work on that, I need for you to do this. Right. Yeah. But having a leadership team that helps keep this going, we still do our Q12 every year. We look at the results. And even though this past year, Bill, the results were like 4.5 out of 5. Right. We're still looking for improvements. We're still going, hey, where could we have done better? Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. And and the team's doing that. It has now become their rhythm. It has now become the culture. This is how we do business. When we're doing onboarding and bringing new people on, we're introducing them to these very concepts. Mm-hmm. Everybody get these cards that have, that's awesome. Here are the 4 things we're asking from you. And here are the 4 things your manager is supposed to be committing to. We're taking them through these concepts so that they get it too. Right?
That's fantastic.
It's creating a system that keeps giving. It doesn't.
I think Ryan is also asking, when you're going through it, because the idea of, we're going to change our culture, that just seems daunting. But the actual time that people are in these cross-functional teams, it's 1 hour a month. So that's 1 hour out of 160 hours that somebody is in a class learning a concept, and then they go back to their normal teams, and we just hijack one of their monthly meetings. It's probably getting stale and useless anyway. And that's where we turn it into an application and a practice. Okay, let's go out and do it. So,
well, I think it's both and, Bill. No, it's both and, Bill. I think it's both of exactly what you guys are talking about. Because here's my philosophy is that, and it's the same philosophy I've had on my own health or my own personal finances or my own companies. Is like so, Heather and Bill, I've got with the ownership framework, the independence by design ownership framework, I've got these 3 circles. That's a Venn diagram. It's time, cash flow, and wealth that are oversecting. And those are, I believe, from a business perspective, those are our first principal constraints. And health is one of our constraints as a human being. But for time, cash flow, and wealth, we have to invest to get the flywheel going. So there's this flywheel that I got going on. My point is like, there's like Heather and you spoke to it, and so did you, Bill, kind of both parts of this, which is we have to invest in, Heather, you said you invested time and you invested cash flow. So that way the machine can start going and propelling, but then it starts, becoming a self-reinforcing flywheel to then get more time back. So you can focus more onto the future.
Correct.
And then you generate more cash flow. And then, but Bill, you talk about the rhythm. So like the way I have it teed up too is that, so my ownership rhythm that I talk about, Heather, it's effectively for privately held businesses. Like, I don't market it like this, but it's the ESOP private equity playbook. So what I mean by that is I have quarterly board meetings, which is effectively exactly what, because I'm actually an ESOP I'm a board member on an ESOP. So it's taking that playbook of the shareholder thought process and all the financials and the value growth, but it's monthly rhythm from the ownership side. So it's budget to actual of a 3-statement model tied to the valuation. That's mechanically what it is. So it's monthly budget to actual, quarterly board meetings, and then you have an annual board ownership meeting to say, how much capital do we have to reinvest next year? Then that layers on top of an EOS system so operations can implement it. And then where I find Bill's philosophy is the leadership process is what is the fuel behind those things. So then it becomes the cadence of what Bill's talking about. And then that allows, I think, the owner operator to extract themselves from the operations. Because they don't like, otherwise there's like, people just sell and they don't, like, it's just because they're tired, honestly, or they don't know what their trade-offs are.
It's burnout, right? You get to the point where you keep doing the same thing.
Yeah,
right?
it's a hamster wheel. If you don't give them the information and the tools to be high-performing teams, then you are running around constantly cleaning up the messes that.
It's exhausting.
Yeah. And so,
them too, they don't want to be living like that.
Right. And I know we're short on time here too. Heather, it sounds like you're having fun. The no is an answer. I'm just curious about your succession for your job, or do you work with the ESOP on how your succession
so part of what I look for in senior leaders at Winans are people who are potential CEOs. And going through a development program with each of those persons that are potential CEOs. So we have, out of this whole process, is individual development plan for everybody in the organization, believe it or not. So the manager is responsible for having those conversations with their team members. What would you like to do? When are you having fun? When are you in your flow? How do we make sure that we're tapping that? I do the same thing with our leadership team. And there are 3 people on our leadership team that's going through a development plan right now. They learn about themselves and are working on improving their leadership skills, right? And we're not making a commitment or a promise that they're going to be the CEO, but we want to make sure that somebody does have the ability to step in should I have a sudden departure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
or should I have a planned departure of any sort? But yes, it's part of it, right? You talk about the flywheel. Well, I want to make sure that whoever takes over keeps some of these good things going and continue to grow the business. And our employees want that too, right? They don't want it to be, we don't know who's going to be the next leader and they're going to come in and probably change everything.
Yeah.
Right?
It's so fascinating because with the ESOP conscious capitalism value thought process, what I like about being on a board, Heather, is especially from the ESOP is every question that I ask is about what is the risk to the sustainability of the future cash flow. That's it. It's the whole lens of everything. And you're doing all the best practices because it's the best for everybody. But it's what creates that sustainability over time. And it's not about one person. It's about the mission and the company and the value they're providing the employees. And I can keep going. I want to be respectful of your time because I think we're already over a couple minutes. Is there anything that you guys want to?
Well, I'd like to just
keep going forever.
Emphasize the sustainability of this because we went through the process and we ended it in 2022. And since then, so in the 2.5 years since then, these numbers have continued to improve. I think currently, Heather, in terms of sustainable behavior, I think I have to go back and check, but it's over 80%, 84% of people either agree or strongly agree that their manager now negotiates absolute clarity of before they accept a promise or a commitment. I think 5 of the 19 facilitators, 26% of them are now enrolled in ongoing leadership development. 10% have actually become managers. These are the informal leaders that we handpicked because we thought they had potential. 42% have either become managers or have accepted expanded responsibilities. So I think that speaks to the sustainability of the process. And so when you talked about, okay, we've had this downturn with Boeing, we have to find a way to reduce some expenses. That becomes the topic that, okay, this month we figure that question out. Whatever, every month you just throw a question or a challenge in front of the team and they use their tools to go solve it. And that's what makes it sustainable is you keep sharing with them what the organization needs to be successful. And I think Heather's done a phenomenal job with that, keeping it alive, where every month you meet with managers and say, okay, which of the leadership process tools or skills or ideas do we want to refresh this month?
The definition of continuous improvement, huh? I mean, it's a flywheel up. That's
Keep
awesome.
the conversation going.
Yeah. And so I
love it.
I think Ryan's question, Heather, was how much of this is you? Because you are a force to be reckoned with.
I agree. Heather, it's so fun.
I don't know about that. I think surround yourself with good people.
Well, and how much is the process that you employ? I think that's always going to be the balancing act. And if you don't have a good process, putting a phenomenal human being up against a bad process, I'm going to bet against the human. But if you put just an average person with a great process, I think that's where that's what we're trying to help people understand. Is it's the process they're using to develop teams is what's getting them in trouble. It hasn't been well thought out. And if you think it through, you get there.
Don't you think, you guys? I think it's with the systems in place and the objectives clear and the KPIs measurable, determining whether it is a person issue, an experience issue becomes a lot less subjective and more objective, which makes it easier to lead, right, Heather? I mean, that would be my thought, because otherwise you're just kind of going, I'm not sure, right?
Fallout, right? You're going to have fallout because all of a sudden people are holding others accountable. You're supposed to be doing this and this is not happening. And so then it leads to the conversation around, this is what the team needed, but this is not what we're getting. It's no longer, I feel you are a bad employee. No, it's the process surfaces who can and who cannot, right? The process is helping you identify where you have gaps. The process is helping you identify people that need to be elevated, right? The process is what helps us.
Yeah. This has been so fun. Like I said, I could sit here I got so many other questions, but I know you got other things to do. Been fantastic, Heather. Congrats on just congrats on having the opportunity, on your personal experience. We're doing this instead of having to just give a bunch of, pension fund investors another IRR. I mean, how fun, right? I mean,
you're impacting lives, right? You're helping people generate wealth and teaching them how to be better versions of themselves.
How fun.
What else can you ask for?
Right. And that's what I think it's,
I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I get rather animated and very, I'm just, I just love this stuff.
Well, you're welcome anytime if you guys want to do any more updates or I have questions about your leadership development program, because a lot of my clients and the people listening too, it's about building that next level leader. Cause it's it's kind of and it's the succession is difficult because you can put all these systems in place, but then it hinges upon the person like you doing the leadership stuff, right? I'm not part of that, but it's here, I'm trying to help people have the highest probability of success with their natural given talents by building the playbook and the systems and the process and all that kind of stuff. But then at the end of the day, it's how do you replicate yourself and then take a step back? I mean, so anyways, we can do that maybe another time. Thanks, Bill, for setting this up, and we'll put a link to the leadership process in the show notes. Any other thoughts? Otherwise, I'm very grateful for you guys' time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Heather and Bill. I thought Heather's story was extremely encouraging. And what I also really liked about it is when I think about Heather's story, and you probably heard this as I was wrapping up the conversation, she effectively has done everything that I'm preaching about how to put in an ownership framework. She understood the game of ownership because she understood valuations coming from the private equity space. She really understood why cash flow and equity growth matter, and she knew what her goals were because of the ESOP structure. And then she built out a financial roadmap, and then she understood her value growth strategies. But then the people and then the leadership team became a sticking point. And so she then worked on the structure that Bill was talking about. And what I think is worthwhile is I have been working for a long time, but specifically over the last 6 months of building out this owner's playbook. I've got a Google Doc that you can access if you go to ryantansom.com and then go to the framework page. Download this Google Sheet, make a copy of it, and then start plugging in your ownership goals and then putting where you're at in the financial roadmap, the value growth strategies, and the leadership team and pay to create that escape velocity that I'm talking about, where your time and your cash flow are decoupled and your equity in your asset of your business is this flywheel experience. So go check out the Owner's Playbook. I think you're going to really like it. And then next week, make sure to stay tuned into Nick Bradley, who's a friend of mine. He has been in the private equity space for a long time, and he's also helping owner operators with similar situations. And him and I are collaborating back and forth about what's going on in the marketplace, what's going on in private equity, what are some of the biggest challenges with owner operators, because we're both working with everybody in the trenches. So I know you're going to like that episode. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and I will see you next week.